Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this month's learning series that we're putting together. Today's learning series will be about Rockwell Automation's network infrastructure hardware, the Stratix lineup. Um, my name is Brandon Singh. I am the network and cybersecurity specialist and business development lead for the Reynolds Company. I am office out of the Dallas-Fort Worth market. In the background are some of the other specialists. Mike Masterson, Wayne Welk from both Houston and the New Orleans Gulf Coast area. They will be able to answer any questions that you might have. Please use the question and answer section of this uh, webinar so that if you do have any questions along the way, they can get those answered for you. And if they can't, they can let me know about the question so I can either find a spot at the end of the presentation, or if it's relevant to a pertinent slide that we're going over, they can stop me and then ask me the question so I can get that answered for you. Just some housekeeping. So upcoming learning series that we have on the schedule. Next month for April, we will be doing a modernization update. So migration paths and moving forward with some legacy equipment you may have in your controls environment to newer modern standards. And then in May, we'll be going back into networking with a cybersecurity update, specifically toward hardening and securing your industrial network within your facilities or plants. So as I said, today we're going to be discussing the Stratix Portfolio overview and some of the changes that Rockwell has made to it. So there have been a lot of changes to the Stratix Portfolio recently within the last 18 months. And the preferred reason for that by Rockwell is to simplify the portfolio and the switch selection, as well as expansion of higher port speeds and product solutions for higher capability networks as things are progressing in terms of speed within plant networks and manufacturing networks. We needed to update the hardware to meet those ever-going changes to future-proof the network infrastructure and backbones while maintaining redundant and resilient architectures that are moving forward in the future. The fundamental features of the switch themselves stay the same in terms of being built on the Cisco architecture, as well as being able to have a cybersecurity focus and a hardening focus that tie into a lot of the more traditional enterprise security features that are available on some of these switches, made drastic enhancements to the web interface and how we configure the switches for improved performance, making them substantially faster, and building in some new capabilities within that, all the while maintaining the architecture of the switch themselves and the software being able to still being able to tie into traditional enterprise tools from Cisco. So here we offer three range of switching: lightly managed, fully managed, and then our high performance line of switches. And depending on what the challenge is that you're facing as a customer, we have a solution, and one of our switches could be able to fit and fill in that gap for those needs, whether that be unexpected events and scaling for future needs, or risk mitigation to reduce costs of network breaches with utilizing port security or third-party certificates such as 62443. All of our switches, we will have a solution that meets just about every customer need or challenge that comes along. So as the portfolio of the Stratix network line sits today that's available, we have the Stratix 2000 at the very low end. That is our unmanaged switch. We move up from there to the Stratix 2500, which is a lightly managed switch. What that means is it has pre-built features and offerings that make it a little bit more robust than a traditional unmanaged switch, but it doesn't have the GUI interface, so to speak. So it's not a fully managed switch where you can go in and create VLANs or do any of those more robust features, but you need something that's a little bit more substantial than a unmanaged switch. And then moving up from there, we have the fully managed switch with the Stratix 5700, which has been the most common and popular switch of the last few years. And we have the new Stratix 5200, Stratix 5400, 5800, and then at the top of the spectrum we have the Stratix 5410, which is our rack mount 19-inch switch. So those are all of these switches that are available today. All of the switches are in various lifecycle statuses currently. So the Stratix 5410, the one at the high end, the rack mount switch has been moved to an end of life status, actually at the beginning of this month, beginning of March, and it is expected to be discontinued by middle of the summer of this year, July 2024, with the exception of the two higher end catalog numbers within that family of the 5410, the IMS 28 NAC and the IMS 28 RAC. Those are on the higher end. Those are the 10 gigabit 10 gig capable switches on the higher end. Those will be available through February 2026, but all of the other catalog numbers within that family of the 5410 are currently end of life and expected to be discontinued the summer of this year. The Stratix 5700 is end of life. All 20 catalog numbers there are end of life with an expected discontinued date of the fall this year, of September 2024. And the Stratix 5400 has moved to an active mature status and expected to transition to end of life in September and then be fully discontinued by the beginning of the year in January 2025. Two of those three should not be, hopefully not be news to you, as we've been discussing the 5400 and the 5700 moving to active mature and end of life statuses pretty regularly over the last 6 months or so, as we've been trying to preemptively tell customers as we've met with you or had conversations with you about that change. So hopefully those two weren't news to anyone, and if they were, apologies that we didn't have conversations with you previously, but this is why we do these learning series and these updates periodically on different topics. So we're going to start with the Stratix 5800. The Stratix 5800 is a fully managed switch and also more towards the high performance end. This will be a direct replacement for any customers using a 5400 that is now moved to an active mature and then soon to be in an end of life status. And with those, anybody using a 5400 and you are looking to migrate that to a newer switch in the future, 5800 would be the switch family that we would move to. It has all the benefits and features of the 5400. It is a fully gigabit capable platform. It is expandable up to 26 ports. It offers both IT and OT configuration management tools. So depending on who's in charge of the network themselves, it is running on the Cisco iOS XE operating system, which is the newer operating system that allows us to have the new and improved and enhanced web UI GUI interface. We still have the full suite of add-on profiles and faceplates, so we can still bring it into Studio 5000 and bring it added as part of the IO tree, as well as putting the faceplates onto the HMI. So all of those things are still available with this switch itself. The switch, as I said, it's a modular switch, meaning that it's expandable up to 26 ports. The base unit itself is a 10-port all gigabit switch with 2 SFPs and then 8 copper ports. And then the expansion modules can be added on. Those expansion modules come in either 8 or 16 port expansions. And then those can be had in a variety of combination of copper, PoE, or SFP. It is available in what we have referred to as advanced and standard features as far as firmware. And you'll see that here on this slide under features, it says standard or advanced. And the reason for that is the standard switch is a standard fully managed switch, fully capable and fully managed, whereas your advanced feature sets is where you are able to unlock DLR, PRP, and some higher end TrustSec security features that are not available on the standard. So if you have or if you're looking for a high performance fully managed switch, and you're needing a DLR architecture or a PRP architecture, or if you've got if your IT is heavily involved in your network and they've got a lot of security concerns, then we would need to look at the advanced feature set, so you could get some of those advanced features such as the DLR, PRP, and the TrustSec for security features. And then, so this slide here, across the top, you'll have all of your catalog numbers for the 5800, and this is kind of a cheat sheet for which expansion module can match up with which specific excuse me, switch, because you do have to make sure that if you are wanting for example, I need a 16-port expansion module that's all power over Ethernet, we need to make sure that the base unit that you purchase is PoE, because if the PoE is not on your base unit, PoE will not work on the expansion module. So you have to make sure that those match up. So this is kind of a cheat sheet to make sure that we align all of those catalog numbers in terms of the base unit with the correct expansion module. So next we'll move into the 5200. This is our newest switch. So this will be the direct replacement for customers using a 5700. These are all fixed units, so they're not modular like the 5800. All SKUs are available in either 6, 10, or 20 port options. This portfolio also offers a base and a full firmware option, very similar to the standard or advanced on the 5800. Why the different nomenclatures, I don't know, but it's the same thing, where your base units are just a base managed switch and fully managed switch, and then your full firmware is where you would get the DLR capability as well as PRP, which is new for the 5200. PRP was not available on the 5700 that this is replacing, but PRP is available on the new 5200. So if you're looking for DLR or PRP, you need to look at a full firmware switch versus a base firmware. This is also going to be utilizing the new iOS XE software features. And some of the advantages that we'll be bringing into this that weren't available in the 5700 are going to be some flex link state tracking, as well as some Cisco iOS embedded event manager. And I have a couple slides, we'll be diving in specifically to what the new iOS and GUI platform brings to the table. We'll still be able to utilize all the faceplates and add-on profiles that you're accustomed to, so none of that is changing. One of the big changes, though, for the 5200 versus the 5700 that it's replacing, you'll see here that there are only 9 catalog numbers. If you're familiar with the 5700, I believe there were 16 to 20 different offerings of the 5700. Rockwell has drastically trimmed that back. And in doing so, what they did is they took what were the most common options and configurations and trimmed that back to just offer those for the customers. So those are the 9 offerings here. One thing with DLR that has been updated for this that was not available on the 5700 is you're now capable of doing 1 or 2 DLR rings depending on which switch you have, whereas previously on the 5700 you were only able to process 1 DLR ring. Well, now with the 5200 you're able to do up to 2. So this is the sizing here, and I put this in here just to let all the customers know that, because this is the direct replacement for the 5700, that spacing wise it fits in the exact same slot, and what it comes into for your cabinets or your enclosures. A big part of this, of why I also put the slide in here, is for customers who are using intelligent MCCs or IntelliCenters. This came up for retrofitting any existing IntelliCenters because those IntelliCenters do come with the 5700 previously. All new orders of IntelliCenters will be coming with the 5200. So this chart and this slide was developed just to let customers know who were retrofitting existing MCC equipment, IntelliCenters, to newer switches, that the sizing is the exact same. So if you had a 6-port or 10-port or the 20-port switch, the sizing is the exact same for that same size 5700 spacing wise. So moving on next to the new iOS XE platform. So this is the new operating system and GUI interface that is on the switch itself. So it is completely different look, and it is an updated menu structure and flow. It has customizable dashboards, it has a screen sorting and filtering option, and one of the biggest takeaways is it's a lot faster. If anybody's familiar with the old device manager or the old GUI interface on the 5700 and the 5400s, the biggest pain point of it is it was extremely slow. You'd make one click or action and you'd have to wait a while for it to actually load to the next screen. That issue has been resolved. It's substantially faster and easier to get along with in the GUI interface. On the main screen, you're now able to click and drag icons, very similar to a smartphone, where you can just kind of drag your apps and widgets where you want them. Same thing, can be done with the new web UI features on the main dashboard when you log into the switch. Some of the key features that are available on the switch now, instead of having to know where to look specifically within the switch itself, you can actually just type. There's a new search menu. So for example, if you want to type out DHCP, you can just search that option, and then in the search bar, and it'll pull it up right up for you, specifically where it is, versus having to know specifically where in the administration of the switch does that setup actually live. Another thing that it also brings to the table is expanded troubleshooting tools. So if you were to get that alert on your faceplate or through Studio 5000 and the controller itself, and you needed to see what that alert was, there's a lot of advanced troubleshooting tools that are now built into the GUI itself, so you don't actually have to go physically to the switch and connect to it to kind of figure out what's going on with it. So you can do some debugging as well as some trace and ping. And then there's also a direct connection to the CLI or the command line interface, which previously you had, if you wanted to interact with the CLI, you had to directly connect to the switch. Now you don't have to do that. You can pull up a direct interface from the CLI to the switch from the GUI itself. Now, with the new iOS and the new software, there did come some changes to Express Setup. So we do have a new IP address for when we're doing Express Setup. The previous IP address was 169.254.1.1, and that is now changed. So the new address when we're doing express setup on the newer switches is going to be 192.168.1.254. And the express setup now is a little bit more involved. You get to do a lot more things from express setup than previously was offered before, and it's now a 3-page setup for express setup. So the address did change, but the default username and password for the switch itself did not. It's still admin and switch to log into the switch. But when we log in for Express Setup, this is the first page you're going to see, and the first thing you're going to do is, put in your IP address and subnet mask for the switch itself, and then any VLAN associations. Where previously on the Express Setup, it was just this one page, and then once you put in this information, that was it. Your switch was configured with a basic setup and you're ready to go out of the box. So now after you do this first page, you're moved into a second page where here we can go ahead and start setting up and configuring ports, whether we want ports available or disabled. And then we can also, so we're configuring our ports. And then if you have VLANs that need to be associated with any specific port, so if we know we're connecting a drive into a specific port and it's on a different VLAN of this switch, we can do that ahead of time. Instead of after the Express setup is done and loaded and then going in configuring it, we could do it all in the Express setup at the same time on page 2. And then in page 3, it gives you a summary of what you are setting up and selecting in terms of passwords, the host IP address, whether or not certain things are configured, ports, VLANs. So your basic configuration gets set up. So you get a lot more capability in your Express setup. So your switch is a little bit more developed than it was previously out of the box through Express setup. One of the features that's added into Express setup is the web UI features is the encryption, and this will be on the 5800 only. When you're doing the Express setup on the 5800, it does ask you if you want to use a Type 6 or Type 7 encryption out of the gate. Now, again, this, as I mentioned before, the encryption and, as I said, the advanced security features, those would be on the advanced firmware. As I mentioned previously, if you're looking for some of the more advanced security features, those would be on the advanced firmware of the 5800. But one of the things, if you have that, that offers you is the, as I said, Type 7 or Type 6 encryption. So Type 6 is the more secure of the two. Don't ask me why the nomenclature of the less number is more secure than the higher one. Still trying to figure that out. Not sure. It's been that way ever since I was in school 15 years ago. But the Type 6 uses a 128-bit AES encryption and counter mode. And the administrator, as you're configuring this, encrypts the password and the username. And while this encryption is set, the running config of the file from CLI cannot be copied. So it's one of the things that's that adds. Type 7 is the less secure. It is more of a traditional cipher-based encryption. And the cipher itself within Type 7 has known to be cracked. The algorithm there is a known algorithm to crack Type 7 encryptions that is available via the dark web. That is public knowledge. That's been that Type 7 was cracked, I believe, back in the mid 90s to early 2000s. So Type 6 is the most secure. So with the web UI, as I mentioned, you'll be setting up your encryption during the dropdown within the Express setup. And then Afterwards, if you needed to go in and change any of those things, once you're logged in as the admin, you'd be able to change that, either searching it out in the search bar as I mentioned before, or it's actually under the gear and the preferences. So one of the other changes with Web UI as we change it to is as far as syncing and swap. So if we, for whatever reason, need to swap out a switch because it went bad, or we need to replace a switch, the 5800 and the 5200 are available and equipped with an optional SD card, just like the 5700 and the 5400 before it. It is a different part number for the SD card. The preferred part number is 1784 SD HC8 for the high capacity SD card. What you can do with this SD card is synchronize configurations and software from the internal memory of the software files, and then so you can have that there, and then as you are using this to replicate multiple configurations to multiple switches, you can load this into a switch, and then on install, the switch will always boot from the configuration and the iOS from the switch. Changes to the startup configuration are always going to be stored to the internal memory. So that's why I said we can use the SD card to back that up. So it works very similar to the previous SD card on the 5700. The difference being if the SD card can work a little easier in terms of using the file manager when we're swapping it out. And then if you have an SD card that has a newer version of firmware when inserted to a switch, the newer firmware and all configuration, the SD card will be copied to the switch. The switch will be updated. If the SD card has an older firmware version, the switch itself, when it boots up, won't downgrade the firmware, but it will take the configuration file, which is a change because on the 5700, if you had a mismatch of the firmwares, it wouldn't take the configuration. It just wouldn't boot at all. From the SD card, it would boot to a completely brand new switch. So there were some changes there that made it a little bit easier for you. So some frequently asked questions that come up. What is the boot time, or why is the boot time on the Stratix 5200 longer than the 5700? And the reason is that the 5200 has a longer boot time is due to the new iOS. It is using a full Linux kernel, and the OS image takes about 15 times longer to load and to load the RAM. And there's also some additional security checks. So the boot time is a little bit longer on the 5200 than the previous 5700, but using the switch itself is going to be a lot faster because of that new iOS, and it's running with it being run on a full Linux kernel. What features are included on the Stratix 5800 advanced feature sets, as I mentioned? So that'd be PRP, DLR, CyberVision, HSR, and TrustSec. So a lot of your, as I mentioned, the redundant architecture features needed for PRP and DLR, and then some higher end security features for CyberVision, HSR, and TrustSec. Does the 5200 support CyberVision? No. The 5800 is the only switch that will support CyberVision with the advanced firmware. Does the 5200 support Device Manager? No. Device Manager has been replaced by the Web UI. And then we get this question an awful lot. Can we upgrade the base firmware to full firmware in the field? No. If you purchase the base firmware switch or standard firmware in terms of 5800, and then you realize you needed a feature set that's only available in advanced firmware, we cannot upgrade that after purchase. So you would have to get a whole new switch and piece of hardware. That question comes up a lot. So in place firmware in the field upgrades are not available. Can Stratix 5700 configurations be directly copied to the new 5200? No, not at this time. Configurations have to be done manually, but we are developing a tool to convert those configurations. And the reason why those configurations can't be copied is due to the operating system mismatch. So you do have to create a new configuration, unfortunately. The 5200 number is lower than the 5700. What features am I losing if I move down? You're not losing any features. You're actually gaining some, gaining PRP, gaining the ability to be able to do 2 DLR rings. Why the nomenclature has moved down, not quite sure. Rockwell says it's because they're shifting in efforts to plan future portfolio growth. But I look at it as the same as Type 6 and Type 7 encryption. Type 6 is more secure, even though you have a lower number. Same instance here. 5200 is a lower number than 5700, but you're gaining a lot of features that you previously didn't have. Are there any plans for a successor to the product for the Armor Stratix 5700? At this time, no. There is not an IP67 rated solution in the Stratix lineup or coming for the Stratix 5200. They are supposedly working on a replacement, but there are no plans available that I can share at this time. And their recommendation is to use an IP67 rated enclosure. And the last one being pricing on the 5200 and compared to the 5700, being that you are gaining a lot of features in the new platform. Pricing is pretty similar to 5700 in terms of if you're going spec to spec, in terms of what features you had in your 5700 and getting the same features in your 5200. So those are all the slides I have to share at this time. Wayne, Mike, were there any questions that came in?
Well, one question I have for you, are the AOIs available for the 5200 right now, and can you do the configuration within a Studio 5000 project?
Can you do the configuration within a Studio 5000 project? Yes, as long as you bring this, after you do Express Setup, and you bring the switch into the IO tree, yes, you can. Are the add-on instructions available? They were supposed to be released at the beginning of this month. I have not confirmed if they were.
Okay.
And the only question that was in the chat you just addressed in the FAQ section, and that was basically around the Stratix numbering.
Yep.
And what was the intent there? So I think you answered that one as best you could.
Yeah, it's a confusing nomenclature. I'm not sure what the plan is there.
So we'll give it a few minutes. Anybody else want to chat in a question, please feel free to do so. I guess the Q&A panel is what works there for those type of questions. So we'll just open it. We'll keep it open for just a few moments. And of course, as always, reach out to your local specialist with the Reynolds company. The specialist team is always ready to help you answer whatever questions you have. If it can't get addressed here today, or if you don't feel like typing it in, feel free to give us a call. We'll be more than happy to try to answer it for you.
Say thank you for everyone who joined. If you do have any questions, please reach out, and we'll be more than happy to go over everything.